Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Thank you. Thanks for the welcome, and hello everyone. It's nice to be with you. Are you all hearing me well? Good. Great. So yeah, very nice to be back and to see you all. And I like this hybrid. This is nice. Still have all the little views on Zoom, but then this one little one that actually is a lot of people there. So everybody. So today I'm actually going to be talking about something that I've never talked about before from this role, from the teacher's seat, and that is devotional practice, which is something that has become more important to me over time. So it's something I've been studying and practicing with my teachers, Kittisaro and Thanissaro, though just want to say that the way that I will speak about it is, just my own understanding, and with whatever they might say might be a little bit different, but that's how teaching goes. You learn and then you share. So it's something that's important to me in my own practice, and felt like I wanted to take the step of trying to offer this, even though it's a part that's a little bit newer for me. Devotional practice. First of all, I'm just kind of curious to see if people want to do a little show of hands. How many people have some devotional aspect to what they consider to be their practice? How many people say? Yeah. So some, seeing some hands coming up online too. Great. So some hands up and some hands not up. So this is being offered for all of you to consider, and just as all offerings are, to take what works, to take what is of interest, to take what feels right, and to let go of anything that doesn't. Devotional practice, devotion, what does it mean? There's a dictionary definition, a religious exercise or practice other than the regular corporate worship of a congregation. Interesting, the word corporate, but I think we're speaking of bodily as opposed to corporations. Or the act of dedicating something to a cause, enterprise, or activity, or great love, affection, or admiration for someone. So there's some kind of worship or veneration quality that is key to this. The etymology coming to English around 1200 from an old French word, dévotion, meaning profound religious emotion, awe, or reverence. So we're talking about practices that are having some kind of quality of emotion and reverence and veneration and appreciation. Some examples of common devotional practices in Buddhism are chanting. Sometimes chanting things like the triple jewel, the homage to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or the qualities of the Buddha, beautiful chant about the different qualities of the Buddha, or taking refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Another example is bowing practice, where we first of all, just this bowing could be seen as a devotional practice, but a bowing practice where there's bowing over and over again repeatedly, or in some traditions, there are offerings are made, like incense or food or something like that. What they all have in common, I think, is some kind of ceremonial aspect. There's some kind of performative enactment of a kind of connection that we're making, some sort of performance in enacting a connection. And so just to say that with devotional practices, I think there can often be some kind of initial associations with other religious experiences with other religions, some kinds of resistance. It might feel kind of weird or foreign somehow, or even threatening. I can say that for myself, one of the initial associations with chanting was that somehow it was going to lead to a certain kind of separation from me and others in my life. There's something about it being, like out loud and taking up space. And I remember, like hearing of other people's stories in their lives where like someone had a reaction to someone else's chanting, it made me think about like growing up and seeing the pictures of the Hare Krishnas at the airport and, or actually seeing them in the airport in like the 70s or 80s or whenever that was going on. And just how kind of strange. And anyway, those are my associations. And you may have your own that you are experiencing now or have experienced in the past. There's something about this stuff it's like very powerful and evocative. So one thing I think is helpful is just to clarify what exactly is it that we're really talking about. And one way that I'll approach it at the outset is to try to draw a bit of a contrast between what I think of as devotional practice and what is sometimes spoken of in Buddhism as attachment to rites and rituals. A kind of interesting thing because devotional practice is very much a part of Buddhism in many traditions, and is seen as very beneficial, skillful, powerful. And then there's this idea of attachment to rites and rituals, which is actually seen as a kind of a hindrance in a way in Buddhism. So kind of interesting because we're really talking in a way about certain rites or rituals. How do they come to be helpful or not helpful? So that's one thing I wanted to explore just as we're getting going here. So the attachment, what's known as the attachment to rites and rituals, is considered to be one of the fetters or the bonds that actually holds us to suffering. And there's a story, an important story in the Buddha's life and in his own awakening story that really speaks to all of this. So the Buddha was practiced asceticism for a long time, as many of you may know. After he left his home and became a seeker, he was with a number of other people who were doing the same thing, trying to find their way to some kind of transcendence in their lives. And they were all practicing these very severe forms of asceticism. So mainly it was around denial of food. Their idea was that if they could somehow or other avoid eating, they could transcend the body, move beyond the body into some kind of a more expansive spiritual realm. So the Buddha was following this kind of ritualistic rule for quite some time. and he was literally starving himself along with his compatriots. And what he discovered, really in a moment of disillusionment, was really that it didn't work, that it wasn't working, that it wasn't getting him where he wanted to go. And as the story goes, he was near death, and a young woman saw him and thought he might be dead, actually, and through her own compassion reached out to him, saw how emaciated he was, offered him some rice, and he had this awareness in the moment: I'm going to take it. I'm going to let go of this idea that I've had about what I need to be doing, and I'm going to do what my body is saying to do, which is to eat something. And he did. And he regained some strength, and he also let go of this idea, this attachment to the ritual, to the rite of this asceticism that he had been practicing. And when he did that, he remembered that actually he had had a really amazing experience as a kid, simply being relaxed, simply being, peaceful and happy under an apple tree in his father's yard. And so it completely turned his practice, And what he did ultimately was let go of the rite and ritual. So it was that attachment to the starvation that is the idea that we're really talking about that isn't so helpful. The attachment to anything that we're doing as if that is going to be what brings us freedom. There's a kind of transactional quality when there's an attachment. It's like, well, I do this and then I'm going to get this back. I am going to be rewarded in some way. And that's not the way it works with the devotional practice. It's not that the performance of it leads to a reward simply from the performance of it. And in fact, if we think that, what we're missing is that we're really perpetuating suffering. If we think that by doing, something 100 times, we're going to get something back, I think we're perpetuating a certain kind of suffering. But if, on the other hand, we can approach these practices from the point of view of seeing them as a skillful means, as a way of bringing about a kind of connection to the Dharma, connection to what's true, connection to what is healing. Making a connection that is true and reliable to what will help, as opposed to imagining that less suffering will come simply from being mindful even. Actually, being mindful doesn't necessarily lead to less suffering. There's the famous analogy of like the mindful thief, very carefully picking a lock. That doesn't lead to less suffering. That it isn't actually what the Buddha talks about in terms of mindfulness either, but it has to be, for something to lead to less suffering, it has to be combined with some kind of understanding of what causes suffering and what leads to freedom from suffering. So the way that I experience a devotional practice to be helpful is because it brings me into connection with a quality that, when it is arisen, will lead to freedom. I hope that distinction is clear. It's not that the practice itself leads to anything necessarily, except that it evokes something that is so valuable. It It is a particular door or a particular tool or a particular entry point to something that is very powerful. Devotional practices, in my experience, work to incline the mind in a way that wisdom and compassion are more readily available. And then to add that there may be more to it than that. There may be some kind of, like magical quality, or there's something about the devotional practices that invites the possibility of forces that we're not fully able to understand, and invites them to work in a way that may be very, I guess to use a kind of economic term, highly leveraged. Like we may be starting some process that is much bigger than we can imagine. So that's something to consider. A frequent kind of devotional practice, one that I've been working with, is a mantra. And one frequent object of devotional practice, which has been important to me, is Kuan Yin. Kuan Yin, as known in the Chinese tradition, or Avalokiteshvara in other traditions. It's the bodhisattva of compassion. The bodhisattva of compassion. So a bodhisattva is understood to be a being who is bound for complete release or awakening, but has made the choice and the vow not to take that final step until all beings are free and awake. So we might think of that as a certain kind of sacrifice, or perhaps maybe just a wise understanding that because of our interconnectedness, there actually is no freedom for anyone until everyone is free. There's no such thing. It's the commitment to be the last one in the room, to stay in the room with the lights on until everyone else has left. Everyone else has achieved freedom, and only then to turn the lights off on suffering. So, however you might think of this bodhisattva ideal, it is clearly very compassionate. It's clearly very much oriented toward suffering and the end of suffering. And that's what Kuan Yin represents, this compassion. We might say in modern language, Kuan Yin is the archetype of compassion. And the basic idea is this: if we want to open to suffering, if we want to resonate with suffering, allow it to really resonate in us, if we want to help alleviate suffering, then devotion to Kuan Yin is a valuable Dharma door. And there's a simple mantra. The Chinese version is the one that I've been taught. Namo Quan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Quan Shi Yin Pusa. Namo Quan Shi Yin Pusa. So the translation, Namo, I return my life, Quan Shi Yin Pusa, to the compassionate one who listens to the sounds of the world. So again, the English understanding through my teachers is, I return my life to the compassionate one who listens to the sounds of the world. I return my life. I love that translation of Namo. It can also be understood as I honor, or maybe I give my life. It's going back or offering to some place, to someone. I like return. It's like I return to someplace I've left, but has been home, someplace I've known as home. I'm coming home again. It's not the movement of searching for something that's new or unseen or undiscovered. It's actually going back to something valuable I've left behind. I return. And to the one who listens to the sounds of the world. So the way that I relate to this is that it's the personification, really, of that being with quality to meditation, the listening, the one who is with the sounds of the world. It's very grounding, I find. It's like a kind of returning to the earth itself. Just a feeling into the earth that has held and known and seen all that has happened over time. I think about how, like the earth has seen like the rise and the fall of the dinosaurs, and all the eons of activity that came before that, and everything that came since, and to really feel into how each of those, all that has happened, has just been occurring moment by moment by moment, just like this. To me, there's something so profound about that it's completely continuous, just one thing after the other, all the way from everything at the beginning, the Big Bang, if you want to believe in that, to this moment, to what comes. And something has been holding it all, with it all. Or it is an unfolding of that something. And so that for me is part of what this practice evokes, that notion of the sounds of the world, whatever sounds the world has been making over and over and over and over again, sound after sound after sound, simply listening, simply being with. Namo Quan Shuryen Pusa, I return to the one who listens to the sounds of the world. I return my life to the one. The invitation, it's more than an invitation, it's really the opening, is to simply allow the resonances to unfold as they always have been, as they always do. So, aligning with this listening, in some ways it's a very simple conception, but it's also an extremely powerful conception. I want to share a list of what are taught as the attributes of Kuan Yin, the attributes that are the attributes of listening to the sounds of the world as Kuan Yin does. It's a long list. These are again from my teachers. So Kuan Yin attributes include wisdom, compassion, swift protection, immediate protection, creative wisdom, impeccable virtue, all victorious, sublime intelligence, worthy of honor, invincible courage, destroyer of negativity, true refuge, joy and laughter, distribution of wealth, auspicious beauty, irresistible truth, ferocious compassion, serene peace, destroyer of attachment, bliss and joy, transformer of poison, remover of sorrow, radiant health, and complete enlightenment. Oh, that's a pretty good list. A pretty nice set of characteristics. So that's kind of what we're going for when that's what we're connecting to as we do a devotional practice, like holding the name of Kuan Yin, the Kuan Yin mantra, invoking and connecting to and embodying the power of all these different qualities. It's also a very radical shift from a more conventional way of being in the world, as all of practice is. A shift from, rather than trying to figure everything out, using the mind to figure everything out, we're shifting to a completely different strategy, which is simply listening, simply being with compassion, giving rise to all of these amazing qualities. So, in my own practice, I've been working with a longer mantra, again, that I've learned from my teachers, called the Great Compassion Mantra. Apparently, it's a Chinese transcription, so transcribed into a Chinese language of a ancient Sanskrit chant from about the 6th century or so. And so the teaching, as I mentioned, is from my teachers, Kittisaro and Thanissaro. Their teacher for this is Master Hua. He's the Chinese master who came to the United States, studied and taught here, and then eventually founded the city of 10,000 Buddhas up in Ukiah. So it's a really beautiful mantra. It is it's long. It takes about going, like at a good speed, it takes about 3 minutes to chant. I'll do just the first maybe like 8 lines or so, just so you can get a feel for it. It's unfamiliar to you. So it's Namo hula dano dola ye namo uli ye pulu jadi shabola ye puti sato puye moha sado puye mohu jalu ni jaye. So that's kind of the way I was taught to do it. It goes on like that. I just did maybe about like 10%, something like that. It's a very embodied experience, like there's an energetic resonance that builds. There's the sound and the way that it moves through the body has a very calming, for me, quality. It brings a lot of comfort and ease. If my mind is spinning on something, like if I'm driving and I'm just having that kind of, just papancha or proliferating mind, just thought after thought after thought, and I can catch that, I'll just start reciting the mantra, just start doing it out loud in the car or something, if I'm alone. And I just keep it going, repeating it as many times as I need to. sometimes once, sometimes 3, maybe even 9 times, until something shifts, and it always does. What I just want to share a little bit of some of the personal experiences, just how it comes through for me. So that's really what you're hearing right now. One thing that I know as I'm chanting is that it's still, I'm not like completely transformed. It's still me. It's still my life. I'm still having my experiences. It's long. The mantra is long. So things will come up in my mind that are just very conventional. You know, I'll worry that maybe, oh, what if I'm about to skip a word or miss a part? Or what if I just missed a part and I didn't even realize it? What if I forget? There are parts that I particularly like. There are parts that I don't particularly like. There are parts where I feel like, oh, this is the part that I always goof up. And there's the part where it's like, oh, this is the part where I'm really kind of in the flow again. And those things change over time. So over time, I've learned to just include those experiences too. As I return to the listening, as I return to the one who hears the sounds of the world. The sounds of the world include the sounds of my mind as I'm chanting. It all gets brought back in. The movements of the mind will themselves mimic what I'm devoting myself to, away from and returning. I keep returning. I return. It's very personal. It's ultimately, like, for me, a very personal relationship to Kuan Yin. And again, it has that kind of quality that I know I've had some resistance to. It kind of reminds me of hearing evangelical Christians say, you know, like, well, do you have a personal relationship to Jesus Christ? And I guess in some way, in most ways, I don't. And I don't think I quite have a relationship with Kuan Yin. I don't know whether that's the way they're talking or not. I honestly don't know. But I know that for me, there's this kind of personal relationship, which is the sense of, like, what happens in me as I contemplate, as I return to this archetype of compassion through this practice over and over and over. What is the actual experience? For me, there's also a communal aspect, an association with people I've practiced with that comes up as I'm chanting, an association with other people chanting. I think about nuns who I've seen chant and what that's like, and it brings up their qualities as well. And all I could really say is that over time, there's a shift. There's just been a movement that I've seen in my own life, in my own practice, toward listening, toward this, like, in these inner Kuan Yin qualities coming through. I certainly don't claim to have experienced all the qualities that I recited a little while ago, that long list, but I can see them coming alive and being a bit more present in my life. And I believe that it's because of this practice. It's also soothing to me to have a practice like this, to know that it's available to me. Like I said, like if I'm in the car, you know, and spinning or whatever, it's soothing to have this available. It's also, sometimes I can imagine myself being in a really difficult spot, like having a health crisis, or being in a, you know, I will imagine like being in a car accident or something like that, or just, and being in a really difficult situation. And it's been very soothing to me to know that I know this mantra now, and I can just go to that. Like, if I can't think of anything else to do, I'll just start doing that. In some way, it helps me feel as if I don't have to fear being helpless or alone. if I'm there helpless and alone, I have this evocation of compassion that's available. And the particular evocation of Kuan Yin, of compassion, of simply listening, it seems to lead in the direction of a complete lack of contention with reality, a complete openness, a capacity to be with, to accept whatever happens. Listening, it doesn't contend with anything. It simply gives rise to hearing. There might be a response that comes up to respond in some way. And we can just hear that too. Relate to that still as something that we hear, that we know in hearing. And that's the compassion of Kuan Yin. Whatever the experience, we hear, we open to, we return. And the mantra repeated over time holds the essence of this position of compassion as an ideal. And then also it, in my experience, promotes the unfolding qualities of compassion as I return again and again to listening. So I'm going to end with a short poem from Robert Frost, and then open to questions, comments, associations, anything you'd like to share. This poem is called Devotion. The heart can think of no devotion greater than being shore to ocean, holding the curve of one position, counting an endless repetition. So thanks for your attention and your invitation, whether you intended it or not, to share something that is a kind of opening edge for me, with a little bit of, quivering or about something that is, again, can have many different associations for people. So would be open to hearing from anyone. I see a hand up. Please go ahead and speak, Samuel.
Hi, it's Samuel actually, but
Samuel, thank you.
Thank you. I so valued your talk. I think one of the things that, for me, that you didn't explicitly say, but that is a part of this is devotion opens us to the purity of the heart. And it's really, and it brings to mind the Shambhala tradition of warrior dignity, that the warrior leads with a broken heart, radically open and non-aggressive. It's like that, listening to I think in the devotion brings us in contact with, or with me, at least my experience, kind of with the brokenheartedness, but it's a way, in holding that, there's a strength, and a capacity to be compassionate with myself, and then kind of open to the world, to from a place of radical openness and strength. So, thank you for reminding me that, and coming into that deep place, because I think it's also that dimension of it. Then it's from an embodied place. And when we're really genuinely there, the mind is quieted so that we're more in contact with a quiet, still mind, just to experience the strength of our hearts and the from a heart space that we most know the truth. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for really highlighting that heart quality. naming it so clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
See another hand. Please go ahead and speak.
I want to thank you for your share for this this talk. One of the things that has helped me a great deal in times of stress that you mentioned, you referred to, is the green Tara mantra, Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Re Soha. And repeating that at times when I'm stressed or having difficulty has been extremely helpful. And so you're talking about using a mantra in times of stress reminded me of that, and I wanted to share that. That's been a really important part of the practice, and, as well as the devotional practice, giving purpose to meditation and purpose to and connection to an outer world. I practice bodhicitta, so it's very important that meditation and anything be dedicated for the benefit of all sentient beings for me. So devotional practice is essential for that. Thank you for your talk.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing your experience.
We have a question here in the room.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll work down there. Hi. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Trip, for having this as your topic. I've been thinking a lot about devotion, and I think of it in terms of the expansion of my practice. I once heard that there was a conference of practitioners of Western Buddhism, and one of the things they talked about was the concern that the danger, the concern that Buddhism, as it's practiced in the West, has just become just become another form of self-help. And for me, that is that's where I started out with. The suffering I wanted to alleviate was mine, and I found Dharma practice incredibly useful in doing that. I mean, just like not taking things personally wiped out about 40% of the suffering in my life. But then I realized that I felt this need that, I need to expand my practice, because it's just not about alleviating my suffering, but alleviating the suffering of all sentient beings. And then, so that's something that, I incorporate in my practice is to always remind myself that it's not for me, it's for everybody. And then expanding it one more time, and this is where I feel like the idea for me of devotional practice is in acknowledging the source of this wisdom and the legacy of this wisdom through the years. So that for me is kind of this kind of urge to expand my practice. That's kind of my reasoning for it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm really appreciating what you're naming about that quality of it's both opening yourself to something that's larger, the suffering of others, and then also opening yourself to something that's larger coming to you. I think that's a beautiful aspect of this kind of practice.
Chris, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thanks so much for your talk, Trip. This has actually been an area that's I'm developing as this past year in a lot of ways. And also, I haven't thought about the Hare Krishnas a long time. Then the Haight-Ashbury in the 70s, they were on every corner with the symbols. They would have big old parties in the park, big old devotional celebrations. It was wonderful to watch. I started going to the Integral Yoga Institute at the time on Dolores Street, and they did a lot of kirtan after we did the yoga and mantras. A lot of those are based on mantras, and they were wonderful. It was great breath work. It was great community, and you could do it for a long time. You get just high just from the amount of oxygenation you'd have. Most recently, I mean, my past years of practice, some 20, 25 years, have been mostly in Vipassana and also the Zen tradition. And I've just been opening up to practices of Tibet. And Tibetan practices are immense. The whole bodhisattva ideal is just out there. And I've been reading a book called Faces of Compassion by Dan Layton. He's actually originally, he's a Zen teacher. He's originally, I think, an art historian or something. And he goes over all the imagery like Tara, Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, or where it was, the beauty and some of the images. And he goes through the about 8 or 9 bodhisattvas, which is very interesting to do, as does the Berkeley Monastery on Saturday afternoons, Saturday evenings. There's the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery, which is associated with the Land of the Thousand Buddhas, Master Hua, the practitioners. It's a lot of Chinese chanting and stuff, but they read the Flower Garland Sutra, which is like a long exposition on I forgot the monk's name who is proceeding on. He meets with 50 different bodhisattvas. Indra's Net's imagery comes out of that, where he goes and meets with them to learn what and to get challenged, and so he can develop his own sainthood in a sense. And what I've been finding for myself, so the long story of where I'm kind of coming from, is a lot of the imagery. I work really well with imagery, and a lot of the teachings that I've gotten from Zen and from Vipassana have been more cognitive for me. They've been more sitting and practicing watching the phenomenology that comes up, the phenomenon that comes up when I sit. But I've never been able to really attach myself, especially to the way the recitations go with working with the Brahma Viharas, as far as taught with the Vipassana community in the greater Bay Area, United States. But once I was able to attach the ideas of compassion, loving kindness onto an actual image, I can now, when I have that feeling state arise, however my practices arise, I expand on that feeling state and then attach it to an image. So then I can go back. I'm not doing this, I'm doing sort of consciously or a little effort there, but now I can go to my altar, which has a lot of dead friends and family on it, and I can see these images and I can lock in without really thinking. The imagery itself, the technicolor, the movie of it, or something just can pull me into that state where I can then, it's like a Vajrayana practice. You need becoming the guru, you become the bodhisattva, and there's energies within your body that are changing just in that imagery. And so I guess what I'm saying is, out of the chanting and the cognitive and the study, to just be able to get into that state by just looking at an image, or even a talisman, like something that's been given by like old partners, let's say, or a friend has given me that I have on my altar, little bits of things that I can look at and say, oh yeah, that's a shell where I had made wild love on a beach once with so-and-so, and it's still there, and I can get in that state and look at it and feel it. So I don't know what I'm saying there, but thanks for bringing this up. It's a really strong part of my practice that I'm exploring right now too.
Thanks for sharing that. And I just feel the energy that it has for you, which is wonderful. And just again, think about, like these many Dharma doors. And, I guess one of the things that comes up for me is just like, yeah, let's start opening them, or let's keep opening them, and see what interesting things there are behind all these different doors. Thank you.
Have time for one more question. I see Tom's hand up on some, so.
Hi. I like the idea of the earth and devotion being hooked up together. I study the I Ching, and the I Ching talks about the earth supporting all of life with devotion, and the earth being devoted to us, it sustains us and it sustains everything. So it's making me wonder and the I Ching also encourages you to cultivate that quality of emotion, of devotion. So I'm wondering, your talk has brought up the question for me of what am I devoted to? And I'm going to have to think about that. I do practice every day, and it's made me wonder. Well, it's just made me wonder what I'm devoted to. That's really all I've got to say. Thanks for your talk. It was really made me think a lot, and it will make me think some more. Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for leaving us with that beautiful question. You know, what am I devoted to? What am I giving myself to? What do I want to give myself to? Beautiful, thank you.